Hey, John Keem here, and today we're going to be looking at some Developer Hub configuration. Specifically, the use case of preventing the developer persona from being able to create their own Developer Hub / Backstage instance. Let's take a look. Over here on the right, I'm logged in as the admin user with the cluster admin role. And over here on the left, I'm logged in as the JKeem user with a developer type role. On this cluster, I've already installed the Developer Hub operator, as well as created an instance of the Developer Hub Backstage object. We can verify that by going to routes, going to Red Hat Developer Hub operator namespace, seeing the route, clicking it, and we can see it running right there. Now let's take a look at how the JKeem user is configured. If we go to users and click JKeem, we can see that there's a particular role on here that allows the JKeem user these actions for config maps on this namespace. Nothing too exciting. If we go to groups, however, we can see that I've created a developers group with one user in it. You can guess who that user is. That's right, it's JKeem. Now, if we go to role bindings, we can see I've attached a cluster role called developer cluster role, something I created. Now, there's quite a bit of roles that I've given to this developer cluster role. I'm not going to go through all of it, but suffice it to say, this user can do quite a bit. Now, let's actually see some of that in action. If we go here to the installed operators and look for Developer Hub again, and then go here, we can see at current, this user can go to operator backed, look for Developer Hub, and be able to spin up their own Developer Hub. Now, the use case for this, as you can imagine, there we go, there it is in the JKeem namespace. The idea behind this is self-service, where developers don't have to wait for a ticketing system or access to do something. They can create in their own namespace their own Developer Hub for their own projects that they're creating and running, presumably if they have permissions to do so, which most do. If you think about a developer type workflow, they would have an admin rights or so to their own namespace where they could spin up databases, spin up web apps, spin up database clients, and maybe potentially spin up their own Developer Hub for themselves and maybe somebody else they're collaborating with. So that's the use case for that. However, for your own use case, you might not want that. Let's go ahead and kill this. We don't want this. For this particular use case, we want a cluster-wide Backstage. We want everybody to share the same instance. We don't want people to self-service in this fashion. So let's see how we can disable that. If we go here, the first thing that we have to do is we have to remove this option from the UI entirely. That way it doesn't cause confusion, and we don't even present to them the ability to do that because we don't want them to do that. And again, that might make sense depending on your use case. You might not want developers to be able to do that. You want to be able to control it all centrally. So we come here as the cluster admin. We go to cluster settings. We go to configuration, and we look for the console object. The one we're looking for is the operator OpenShift IO console object. Click that. In the upper right, we go to Customize, go to Developer, and we scroll all the way down to Developer Catalog. And we look for Operator Backed. There's two columns here, Enable Types and Disable Types. Well, we want to disable the Operator Backed Disable type. So we simply select it, click the chevron, and move it to Disable Types. Now, by doing that, it's saved automatically, and you can see the message here presented. This config update requires a console rollout. This can take up to a minute and require a browser refresh. So we come back here. If we refresh this page as JKeem, this third option with the lightning bolt called Operator Backed should go away. And indeed it does. So that's good. Developers are no longer presented with that. If we go to installed operators, what you'll see though is that simply removing it from the UI has not restricted permissions for the developer from being able to then hit the API endpoint and create their own instance anyways. Let me show you what I mean. So if I come here and I log in as JKeem, okay, OC, who am I? Yes, I am JKeem. Now let's take a look at this YAML that I'm about to apply. You'll see that I'm going to create a Backstage object called Developer Hub from JKeem. There's only one here, so we're going to see that here. Let's see apply. There you go. You can see that I've created it. I was still, again, being able to hit the API endpoint and create it. So let's delete this. This is what we want to stop. Now from here, it's just a regular role-based access control or RBAC exercise. In Kubernetes OpenShift, there's a powerful RBAC functionality that allows you to be able to fine-grainedly define the actions for every single object in the cluster for every single type of user or group. We saw it earlier when we looked at the groups and then looked at the cluster role here. Again, this person had a lot of access to a lot of things. Those things include the Backstage object. So for this particular use case, here's some Backstage objects that we have access to. We have all access. For this particular use case, not only do I want to prevent the creation and deletion of the Backstage object, I want to prevent all access to it, including gets, including watches, including lists, everything. So let's see how we can do that. So if you've ever done any RBAC before on Kubernetes OpenShift, this should feel very familiar. So here's one here. You can see all the verbs, all the actions for the Backstage object. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's see where else there is here. Here we go. Here's some create, update, patch, delete for the Backstage object. I don't want that. And here's two more. There's some gets, some lists, and some watches. Again, I want to remove all permissions. And I believe that's it. Yep. Hit save. Great. Now, if we go back to watch our list of developer hubs, we should see still only one. And if I try to apply this again, if all went well, I should not be able to apply this, and I should not see one come up. So let's do that. And indeed, it does not. You can see my permission error here, and you can see that no other instance was created. So we were successfully now able to prevent the developer type persona from being able to do that. One other note before I leave you here is that we went through some of the role-based access control for the Kubernetes OpenShift cluster. However, once Developer Hub itself is stood up, you can actually go into it and configure the Developer Hub instance as well using its own set of RBAC. I'm showing here some of the docs related to that. You can see role-based access control RBAC in Red Hat Developer Hub. So you can see some of the roles defined here, where maybe we give them access to certain catalogs, access to catalogs or access to scaffolds, and a bunch of other very powerful, fine-grained permissions that you can give to all the users on your DevHub instance. And with that, that's everything. Thanks very much, and I'll see y'all later.